Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Help with Natalie Cuomo. I'm so excited to be here today with Liz Miele. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing the podcast. First of all, I've been looking forward to having you on for so long. I love your stand-up so much.
Thank you.
I love the way you write your comedy. You've put out a book.
Yeah.
You have 3 one-hour specials on YouTube and an album, and you've just done so much. You're so accomplished. I just want to pick your brain so badly.
Yeah, go for it.
You're amazing.
I'm an open book of mild knowledge.
I mean, I just spend so much time just researching you and being like, oh my God, am I going to remember all the questions I have to ask? But in reality, I just first want to tell you, you're amazing.
Thanks.
I love your writing. Obviously when you have someone on your podcast, you compliment them.
And I love it. I love a good compliment.
But you really are I hosted the stand. I watch your set also, and I love the way that you write is very specific to you, which is cool. You really have a distinct voice where it just sounds like you on stage and you off stage, and you're just really funny, really smart, and I love that.
Thank you so much. What a great way to start a podcast.
Yeah, I was having lunch with Dan today, and I was like, what other young female comedian is putting out a new hour of material every year and a half? That is fucking amazing.
I think in general, I've learned enough to know that everybody's goals in this business is not the same.
Yeah.
So I have one of my really close girlfriends. She's a comic in London, and we kind of started together. And it wasn't until 10 years into our friendship that I realized that we had vastly different goals. Because I've always been a very stereotypical comic where I want to do the road and I want to perform hours and I want to put out albums and specials. And she's like, I want none of that. And I was like, what? Because we started out the same way. We're both funny comics that were building up our material, and then to find out that she wanted nothing that I wanted, especially when that's what I thought. You just think that's what everybody wants. So what I'm fortunate about is that at least that though my career goals have been more supported as the system, the comedy world has changed.
Yeah.
So I'm able to do more things on my own. I don't have to wait for the industry. The better you get, the more stage time you get, which allows you to write more and to grow more. So I feel like the one thing that I'm fortunate is things are always hard in this business, and especially for women, but they were really hard, and I was able to at least see how things were changing and utilize it. And that's the only reason I've been able to put out all these albums and specials, is because, everything can be done on your phone at this point.
Yeah. What do you feel so a lot of your work is self-produced, which that you're putting it out yourself. And that resonates with me so strongly, because I feel like a lot of things that I've done almost everything has been by myself. Is there what do you feel are the benefits to doing that? What have you learned in delegating things to other people, and how important it is to keep those roles to yourself? Because from what I've read about you is you're super organized, you have all of your notebooks. What have you learned about kind of delegating those responsibilities?
So I think, in the beginning, it's nobody owes you anything. Even when you are funny, I think that I was definitely headed down this bitter path, because I saw myself getting better, but I felt like my opportunities weren't matching that. And that just has to do with the fact that this business is saturated and everyone's funny. The city is filled with some of the best comics in the world. So between the person being successful and being funny and the person failing and being funny, they're next to each other, but they're having vastly different experiences. And I think you can look at that and think, woe is me, or you can look at that and be like, well, how do I even just survive? Or how do I continue to do what I love? And I feel fortunate that I had a good enough support system. I was in therapy, and I had the gumption to be like, well, if nobody's going to choose me, I'm going to choose myself. And because of that, you start to see that there's only so much space and there's only so much risk the industry is going to take. And that doesn't mean you're not good. It just means you might be different, and different is scary until somebody accepts it. And the cool thing about social media is now if you find your audience, they're more willing to take a risk on different because you just proved that different makes money. And that's really all they care about. They're not willing to take a risk because they're not sure if it's going to make money. But as soon as you go, hey, I'm making money, they're like, this is so great. I've always loved you. So in the beginning, I self-produced all my albums and specials and put on shows and did all this and put on tours, all because I wanted to continue to do this. I wanted to make a living doing this, and I wasn't being given the opportunity opportunities. And as I started to build a fan base, as videos started to go viral, as people started to tell me they liked what I did, I started to be like, oh, I think I'm on the right path. I'm going to keep investing in social media and PR classes and even just learning from other comedians and picking other people's brains as well. And now, I in and out had like boutique managers, but I never had an agent until 2020. I got an agent in October of 2020, 18 years into my career. And so what's crazy about it is I still book a lot of stuff myself. I get a lot of stuff through my agents, but I still book a lot of stuff for myself because they might not have a venue that I'll be like, a good example is I'm going to be in Toronto in April. And I was like, hey, I would love to do Toronto. Can you get me gigs in Toronto? And they're like, we can't. No. Whether it's the venues didn't make sense or bookers weren't getting back to them or they didn't have those connections. I don't know what it is. It's different in kind of every city. But I had done Toronto in early 2020 before things shut down, and I sold out this 100-seat venue. So I was like, I'll just do that again. So I booked that. I already sold out a show. I'm adding a second show. I booked myself for Montreal. Again, they couldn't get Montreal, so I booked Montreal. It's more of a risk, just like it was before I had my agents. I have to book my hotel. I have to book my flight. If nobody comes, it's, I could break even or lose money. But I'm at a place that even though I have a safety net in some sense of an agent and managers and people knowing me and having a fan base, there's still stuff that because I did it before, what am I just not going to play Toronto? It's like actually my biggest fan base.
Yeah.
And just because I'm not either at a place that I can do a 2,000-seat theater or at a place where there's a comedy club that is willing to take a risk on me, I refuse to not do what I want just because it's going to take some work. And I feel like the 20 years in my career, but especially the last 10 years of doing everything myself has told me that there might be more of a risk doing it on your own, but it's worth it. And at the worst case scenario, I lose money, but I learned something.
Yeah.
So now in my career, as things have gotten, let's say 30% easier, whenever I hit a roadblock, which you will, because it's almost like I describe it like your education. So you'll be in middle school. Let's say you're in the 8th grade and you're the cool kids. You know what I mean? You're the 8th graders. You're awesome. You know what's going on. But then you become a freshman in high school and you go right back to being like the babies and nobody respects you and nobody cares about your opinion. But then you become a senior and now you're the cool kids and everybody. And then you go to college and you're back to, and it's like, it's perpetually like that. So you're an open micer and then you're doing guest spots and then you're doing like Monday paid spots and then you're hosting and then you're featuring and then you're headlining clubs and then you're headlining small theaters and then you're doing big it's every single time it's a new learning experience and it almost starts over. It builds up a little bit, a little bit from hosting that you can bring to featuring, but it's still kind of a different version and there's different problems and there's different advantages, and same thing with headlining and same thing with doing a theater as opposed to a club, same thing with having a fan base as opposed to being in front of a bunch of strangers that have never heard of you. So I feel like each thing that you want to accomplish, it builds on itself, but also because everything was so much harder, I am less scared of how hard things are. And you see it a lot in this career where somebody's brilliant, just somebody's like one of the best comics. They stop writing, they stop touring. They're, you know what I mean? They're not building a fan base, even though they're the best comic in the city. And it's because they're not constantly putting themselves in this risk-taking scenario, whether it's from a business standpoint or a creative standpoint. And the reason I write a new hour every year and a half is because I like that risk-taking. I like the challenge of writing. I like even the creative business aspect of marketing myself and how do I get somebody that would never even listen to me actually click on a video or come out to a show, or how do I make an interesting poster that makes me proud to? Because I don't want my face on everything. I don't care.
I know.
But that's what it is. Your face becomes your brand. And God, I would love to post a picture of a cat and be like, come see me in Toronto, but people don't click on it. So now it's my face. Well, how do I make a poster where I'm like, oh, it's pretty cool and I like how I did that, and I'll just still put my cat in that picture anyway. And like, so I feel very fortunate that the challenges both creatively and on the business side is what propels me forward and makes me excited. Don't get me wrong. I still complain. I still get frustrated, but I've seen so many benefits to the risk taking that's what kind of pushes me. And I don't think it ever gets easier.
Yeah. What is your writing process like?
So I complain first.
Same.
First I start out crying, and then crying turns into ranting, and then ranting turns into writing some of it down. Then there may be some more tears. I feel I have some self-awareness and some introspection that when something's happening, even if it's the worst thing ever, I'm like, this will be a joke someday. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I could be like, I hate everybody, but this is unique. Like, so I do tend to, at the very least, take notes either truly in the moment or while I'm processing it. So I might call my friend Maria and tell her about, you know, what's going on. I'm thinking about breaking up my boyfriend, and she'll like talk to me, and I'm like complaining about him. And like one of my kind of more storyteller jokes in my last special, I was literally like was about to break up with my boyfriend, and I was so angry because I loved him and I didn't want to, but I just couldn't do it anymore. And I'm telling her this analogy and I'm crying. Like, I'm super upset. I'm just, you know, it's a 4-year relationship that I don't want to end, but I'm unhappy and it's not getting better. And I do this analogy. She's listening, but she's also laughing. And we're close enough that like, even when I'm like not ready for it to be a joke, because I didn't intend to be a joke, I was really upset. And she calls me up 3 days later and she goes, I've told 4 people that analogy and they think it's so funny. I really think you should write it down. I was like, I don't even know what I said. I was so upset. And she rehashes it to me and I start thinking about it and I start writing ideas. And it ends up turning into this 3 or 4 minute bit about why I broke up with my boyfriend and why I wanted it to work. But like, I can't keep trying. And I wouldn't even say it's my funniest joke if I'm being honest, but I do think it's my most visual and one of my, something that was a challenge to how I write and something I don't know if I would have written if it wasn't for the pandemic and doing Zoom shows, which kind of allowed you to go a little bit without laughter.
And like write more too.
Yeah, and just really be a little bit more whimsical with my stand-up. And it's, like I said, I don't even think it's my best joke, but I think it's one of my more interesting jokes and one of my more interesting stories and one of my most honest and heartfelt jokes. And it came from a really painful place, and it came from a friend being like, I think you should write this. And that happens a lot too, which is sometimes I'm just being my crazy self, and it's through my friends being like, I know you're sad, but you should write that down. But then the next step is I kind of dump, like I don't judge it, funny, interesting, sad, whatever. I just kind of dump everything. Then I'll start editing on paper, and then I'll try it out the best to my memory. I have a pretty bad memory. So the first time is like, what are the key lines that I want to remember? And I'll just kind of, as best as I can, do it at a show, record it, listen back to what got laughs. And depending on what worked, sometimes I completely said something wrong and that's like, let's try that again. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that line was funny. And that's where people are laughing. Maybe that's the direction I should go in. So I start to edit on stage depending on where it's going. And that might change the course of the joke. And then it becomes a constant. I'm dyslexic, so I'm very visual. So what I'll do is I'll write it, perform it, listen to it, transcribe it, edit it from the transcription, then perform it again, listen to it, transcribe it. And if you look at my notebooks, you'll see the same joke like 20 times sometimes.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'll get to the point where I'm just changing a line here or there. And so I'll only transcribe the new line. And then it just literally, it'll be like, you know, breakup joke, third line, and I'll just have arrows everywhere and I'll look crazy. But it's the first half is all like writing and editing, and then eventually I'm doing more and more on stage. And even though I'm technically editing on paper, it's from doing it repeatedly. And I won't always listen back to it right away. Sometimes I want it to be loose, so I'll just go on stage for like a week or 2 weeks and just whatever comes out of my mouth. And then I listen to all of them and I kind of throw them together and see all the different lines that kind of worked. And then eventually it's either done because I'm hitting all the points I want to hit and everything's getting a laugh, or sometimes I'm like, everything's getting a laugh, but it's not done. I don't know why. I just feel like I have more to say. So then it's about sitting with it and being like, what's the next direction I would take this in? And that usually starts to build out either that chunk and that kind of, let's say, topic, or it starts to build out like that whole section of feelings or, or events or what have you.
Do you ever feel, sometimes I feel like I'll like try out a joke on stage and it'll like do so well, and then I'll be like, oh, and I'll feel like it did well because it was new.
100%.
Like, and then I'll like try it again, like a few more times, and it'll do really well, and then I'll be like, that like new energy left. Like, I'm like, how do I I'm like, does that mean that the joke wasn't funny ever, or that just like that new energy was so important and I have to find like another way to bring it to it?
So that's a really good point, because I think sometimes new jokes do well just because you're excited and you bring, and there's a casualness and a lack of polish, and we're finding out together kind of moment. It's like truly, I don't know, like, it feels a little bit like a magic trick. We're like, no one knows how this happened.
Exactly.
I don't know how that appeared. You don't know how that appeared. This is crazy. So I do think there's that spark is very rare, and I think I do chase that a lot, especially as somebody that's constantly writing new stuff. And I have had that happen where I do it, it's fresh, it kills, and then as I start to write, I almost overwrite and it starts to lose. But then it's about going back to the old stuff and being like, was it a voice? Maybe it was the way I said it with my voice. Then I start to look at it as, I know the lines are funny, but I've lost some tone, or I've lost some silliness. And it's actually not the words that have made it stale, it's my delivery of it. So I'll go back and listen to that original one and be like, oh, I whispered that, or I hesitated because I really didn't know what I was going to say. So let's fake a hesitation. Right. So sometimes it's also you think, I think we tend to think things go stale because it's not surprising to us anymore, but it's actually the uniqueness of the way we delivered it. And so then I'll go back to that. And it's actually made me a better performer by trying to get back to or trying to mimic some of the surprise of it.
How do you mimic it? Like the pauses?
Yeah, because like if I really don't know what I'm going to say next, I might stutter, or I might say it slowly because I don't actually know what I'm saying. And sometimes it's that delivery that's what's making it funny, because it comes out a little like hesitated, as opposed to like when you say it affirmatively, they're like, well, I don't like it that much. So it's like kind of mimicking. It's basically acting. You're bringing back who you were when you thought of it. And for me, one of the reasons I write so much is I like, when I'm delivering a joke, I as closely want to be the person I was when I wrote it. But as you grow as a person, as you have new experiences, or even just processing that experience, you are growing. So if I'm talking about a breakup, I'm sad, I'm confused, sometimes I don't know why this ended, and I'm bringing that sadness and that confusion and 6 months ago Liz to stage. But as I become healthier, as I get farther away from that relationship, as I even process it with that joke, I don't miss him as much. I'm not that sad anymore. But I'm proud of the joke, and now I'm tapping into 6 months ago Liz. But eventually, I don't want to be 6 months ago Liz. I want to be current Liz. So a lot of the reasons that I continue to write is I am who I am in that moment. I polish that joke. I process it. But I never want to get more than a year or so away, because I'm stunting my own growth comedically and emotionally by still talking about a boy that I don't even think about anymore. So, my past set had a lot of stuff about my breakup. Now I'm trying to date. I'm barely trying. But, like, that's where I am, and that's what I want to talk about. But eventually, whatever happens, whoever I am, I really am not the same person, and I want to continue to grow, even if it's micro growth. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a little bit happier, or I'm just a little bit more open, or I'm just a little bit less angry, whatever it is that I'm going through. But I want to, for the most off-stage Liz and on-stage Liz, I want it to be within 6 months of who I actually am.
I really love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of comics, you'll be like, why they've been doing this? And it makes sense, because when you have a joke that's so reliable, it's hard to let go of. But it's really cool that you always write to stay truthful to like the person that you are.
And it's like, so like my first album, I wrote it in a year and a half. So the sad story of it is, I had been doing stand-up for 10 years. I would say I tried making an album that was like the best of the last 6 years. So I would say I wrote a lot of it in the last 2 years, and then some stuff that always worked. And I was like, I'm going to make an album. And I tried recording it twice. I got ruined twice. There was audio issues. There were all these different issues twice, and I was heartbroken. I was actually dating this dude, and he just didn't get it. I broke up with him like a month later. I was like, you don't get it. You don't get it. Not the only issue, but I was like, you also don't get it.
Cherry on top.
Yeah, you also don't get it. So I tried twice. It didn't work out. I was so mad about it. And I remember calling up my friend Hurry, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I think it's a sign. I don't even know what I believe in, but I decided it was a sign, and I was going to throw out everything except for one joke, and I rewrote a whole hour. And that's actually how I found my pace. I did it in a year and a half, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. So I've tried to kind of stay true to that path and figuring out how long it took. But because I wrote my first hour in a year and a half, it was truly the first time that I was like, oh, this is today Liz performing this. And so when I started to write my next one, that was today Liz writing that. So my first hour, I am so far from that girl. I wrote it when I was 26, 27. I taped it when I was 28. I'm 37 right now. I am not that girl. I'm so depressed. I have suicide jokes in there. I have jokes about hating myself. I have all these jokes, and I'm proud of the material. It's really well written. I'm really proud of myself, and I still like those jokes, but that's not who I am anymore. And what's crazy is I was giving that hour away for $1 if you signed up for my mailing list. And then during the pandemic, I had taped my special in 2019 and I was trying to sell it. So I was trying to prove to the people I was selling it that I had a fan base. Mm-hmm. So I took that hour that I was pretty much already giving away for free and I just put it on YouTube. And it was for my 18th anniversary of doing stand-up. So it was March 28th, 2000. And I was like, it was like 2 weeks into the pandemic. And I was like, hey, we're all stuck at home. Here's my first hour for free. Didn't think anything of it. It now has almost 3 million views. But what's crazy is I'm getting a lot of fans that are saying, first of all, 10 years ago, Liz, they were just like, you're so pretty. I was like, I was. But also, they're falling in love with a really sad version of me. I never want to be that person again. I just started doing therapy when I was 25. And even at 26, 27, I was growing, but I was still figuring things out and really sad. And I didn't really have a lot of tools to self-soothe and understand myself. And I was really still this toxic person that was making myself unhappy. And while comedically I am proud of that material, emotionally it is quite painful for me to watch that stuff. And I'm making a fan base off it. And I know for a fact there's people that are seeing that hour and then they see my other hours rapid fire. So they're literally watching me grow as a person. And I've had people be like, oh, I don't like confident Liz. And it's a little heartbreaking to be like, oh, you like suicidal Liz, but you don't like found herself Liz. And to me, it's like finding a fair weather fan within a couple of hours. Like, in a couple of hours, they're like, ugh, she doesn't seem like she would date me. Like, but it is really interesting that there's people that have grown with me. There are people that have seen the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, and now the fourth hour, and like the changes both in how, because I was very monotone, I was very slow and sad and deliberate, and now I'm more my pace that I talk normally. I yell a lot more. I rant because while comedically I was who I was, delivery I wasn't. I was scared to talk really fast because you trip over your words more, and a lot of people don't like women that talk fast. And there's all these negative connotations to who I am as a person that I tried to hide on stage because I wanted people to listen to me. And now as I'm more confident in my abilities, my fan base, me as a person, I don't care. I don't care if you don't like me. I just don't. Because if you don't like me as a comic, you're probably not gonna like me as a person. And if you don't like me as a person, why would I keep you around? And you get to a point in your life where I still struggle with people-pleasing tendencies, but for the most part, I can talk myself through it and go, am I doing this because I want to help somebody and I like them? Or am I doing this because I want to be liked? And now I can go, in this situation, being liked wouldn't be self-serving. Being liked would actually harm me as opposed to showing up authentically. And so the same way that I try to show up authentically in my personal life, I want to do that on stage. So if somebody comes back and goes, I don't like you, and or I don't like the new version of you, I go, well, then our paths are going to separate, and that's totally fine. I'm glad you like Depressed Liz. I hope it helped you. But you might want to look at yourself, because if you only like Depressed Liz, maybe you're only relating to Depressed Liz, and maybe you should go to therapy. So I think more and more I don't even know where this question started, sorry. But I've found myself, and I try to stay true to that, and that incorporates me writing in the moment as who I am.
That's amazing. I really feel inspired by that. I like that a lot. I think that element of like people pleasing in your stand-up is so interesting. Like people, like just being able to be like, if you don't like my stand-up, you wouldn't like me as a person, and therefore I wouldn't want you here. And also, it's interesting that people like what people want to see, like understanding that based on like you're seeing your growth as a person. Like you've been doing comedy for so long and writing so much that you put out all these specials. I think some people don't write enough for their growth as a person, for their material to catch up to their growth as a person. And 100%. It's really cool that you're able to do that and like to be able to see that too.
And to be proud of myself.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I'm not proud of my first. I really like my first album and I know how hard I worked and I'm proud of the writing. But at the same time, so my one hit wonder from that album, or like my, like, let's say, on like a music album, it'd be the single. So like my single was called Feminist Sex Positions, and it went viral. I worked really hard. I took a PR class. I read like 10 social media books, and it ended up getting millions of views on YouTube and millions of views on Facebook. And it really started to build my fan base. It was the first time people started to really talk about me. And that was the whole point of doing the album, is I wanted to headline more and I wanted to make a name for myself. And I accomplished that even just with one joke. And people wanted me to keep doing it. So I had 3 feminist sex positions, and it was all this 3-minute story about how my brother told kind of this like, you know, crude joke to me, and I raised him, and I just thought better of it. Like, I was like, I taught you better. Like, why? Like, and also, why do all these positions always are harmful to women? And so I still don't really talk about sex too much on stage, and it was probably one of my more vulgar jokes, which was very outside of who I was, but it was something I had thought about, and I wanted to be authentic to what I was thinking about, and it resonated with people, and it became viral. But magazines, comedy clubs, fans wanted me to continue to build off it, and it's done.
Yeah.
It's not who, and I think if I stayed in the trap of somebody wanted me to write a book, I was like, well, I don't care. Like, if I stayed in that pocket and I tried to live off the hype of this one joke, I don't know if I would be where I am right now. I wrote that hour, I wrote that joke, I'm proud of it, let's move on. And then my next album, I wrote a 7-minute story that technically, it's called Fuck Finland. It's technically about missing a flight, and it could be seen as a cliche airplane joke, but really it's about how I'm so organized that this stuff doesn't happen to me. And it's really about anxiety and how I've compensated for my anxiety. And that went big. I mean, there's a lot of comics actually is how they really started to respect me and like me, because it's a 7-minute story, and it's just, for our lives in general, it's like, yeah, I've had this happen or almost happen, but it's just like, it really taught me that I'm good at storytelling, and I grew as a comic, and I started to use a lot of the stuff I had learned in therapy, and that was implemented, and that became like my next kind of hit. And then this last special, I don't even know, but there's a couple of bits. There's like an abortion bit, there's a miscarriage bit, there's a couple of other ones that I've kind of, and so now each album, I can see how my writing has grown. I have other hits. I have other viral videos. And now I'm known as somebody that has viral videos. I'm known as somebody that has albums. And I'm known, like you said, as somebody that's a writer. And that only happened because I wrote it, I performed it, I was proud of it, and then I moved on.
Yeah.
And you know what's kind of crazy? I really wish I could find this video. There was a YouTube video like 10 years ago. My old roommate Chris showed it to me, and it was Tupac in the studio. And he basically was doing like, it's good enough. He's going to the producers. He's like, it's good enough. It's good next. It's good enough. Let's go. And you know what? He died at like 26. He was like in his early 20s, but he was prolific. He had all these albums. And I think it really influenced me, believe it or not, because is every Tupac song a hit? Absolutely not. But he made so much in the short amount of time that he was around. And the truth is that perfectionism often is a sign of insecurity and worry that people are going to judge you. And at the end of the day, being an artist is creating, but also just putting it out there, and what happens, happens.
Yeah.
Is every joke I do perfect? Have I put out jokes where I was like, I probably should have worked on it a little longer? Absolutely. I have regrets, but I'm also in a place that it's like, it's good enough. I'm proud of it. I'm ready to let go of it. I don't want to work on it anymore, which is a hard thing to say. And sometimes I think you're made to feel bad about saying that. Like, hey, you could add this tag. I could, but I don't want to. I'm done. I've decided I'm done. And it's good enough. So I think more and more I've been influenced with the fact that I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do the best I can. And this might be all I can do in this moment, and we'll make the next joke better.
I love that so much. So you have been doing stand-up since you were 16?
Yeah.
That is so amazing. I feel like What inspired you to want to do stand-up? Like, is this just what you want to do your entire life?
I clearly, my family's very funny. Like, my mom's really funny. My dad has a really good sense of humor. I'm one of 5 kids. All my siblings are funny, even the ones that I sometimes don't think are funny. Like, my older sister, I sometimes doesn't think funny. And then I hung out with her over Christmas, and I was like, she's pretty funny. Like, when she's telling, I mean, she's crazy, but she's telling these stories, and I'm just like, my sister's so funny. But like, honestly, my brother Sam is the funniest person in the family. I don't even come close to Sammy. He's just absolutely. I will send him something, and I'll say something like cliche, and my brother will have like the funniest joke back. It's almost upsetting. And I think it was rewarded in my family. So I grew up in an abusive household and a really toxic household, and it did relieve things. And I know it absolutely was a coping mechanism, but I don't think I thought about doing it or even thinking I was funny, let alone doing anything with it. I discovered stand-up specifically because we always watched like SNL and there was like comedy around the house and stuff like that. But I don't think stand-up itself was something that I understood or knew about until I was like 13, 14. And I found I was dyslexic in the 3rd grade. I didn't know what people were doing when they were reading. They'd be like, read to yourself. And I was like looking at pictures. I was like, wow, this seems kind of boring, but I'll do it. And so I was in all these special classes. And because I was in these special classes, they forced you to write a lot and be creative. So I was really rewarded for any effort I did to this thing that was hard. And I started writing these books, and I was writing little short stories. And I clearly enjoyed writing, but I showed nobody because I don't know how to spell. And I was really embarrassed. And then when I discovered stand-up, you could write, but nobody ever had to see it because you were performing it. And it became this perfect mix to be creative without nobody ever had to see my physical writing. And I just became obsessed. I mean, I started, this is VHS time. So like somebody would be on Comedy Central, and they always repeated stuff. So, Bill Burr's half-hour special would be on. I'd put my VCR on and I would tape it. And then I'd go to my girlfriend's houses and be like, I got to show you Bill Burr. I got to show you Mitch Hedberg or this guy, Greg Giraldo. And it's all, I actually still had those VHS tapes until like 10 years ago. And my friend converted them all to CDs because this is before they were putting those things on like iTunes and stuff. But I have all these like literally things I taped off the TV with commercials on a CD now. And I fell in love with, again, I'm one of 5. I love attention. I was not getting it as a kid. So I fell in love with the idea that people had to pay attention to me, that they paid attention to me for my creativity, and that I got to really tap into a side of myself that I felt didn't even exist. Like I didn't think I had opinions because I was in a house that was like speak when spoken to, and we weren't very much rewarded, at least at home, for being creative or different. So it was this space where I didn't even know if I was able to do it. I just wanted to try. And then when I started performing when I was 16, I felt like I found my community. I never felt like I really fit in anywhere, and I always felt truly like a loser. I still kind of feel like a loser even in this community, but at least there's other losers that are with me, and we share a shared experience as well as a shared path. But the way I take in the world and the way I express myself always felt wrong. And then all of a sudden this art form was like, nah, you got this. Like it just felt like my brain finally had a place that was accepted. And I felt so much better. Even when I was bombing, I was just like, I got to do it.
That's awesome.
Like it just, I think you have to keep that spirit alive. I still walk around being like, I get to do this. Even when I'm mad, I can walk home and I can be like, dude, you pay your rent telling cat jokes. You have no problems. And I still think I'm very fortunate. There's a lot of people who have been doing it as long as me, more successful, less successful. They're just bitter. And I feel very fortunate between, therapy and taking care of my mental health on my own, and also having a clear path and clear goals, as well as not just these arbitrary goals of I want to be famous or, I want to be the best. Like I just want to be good and be proud of myself and be creative. And as I stay to that core, I'm pretty happy. And so I've kind of maintained my childlike excitement for 20 years because I've stayed true to my goals.
That's awesome. I feel like, so can we talk about how I was reading online that you wrote to a bunch of your childhood idols, and only 2 of them responded. And number one, what was it like? Did you write, you're dyslexic, did you write these letters by yourself? And can you tell me a little bit about that and your relationship to, you know, what encouraged you to actually like reach out to people that you looked up to?
So I came out to my parents like I was gay, but to do comedy. So both my parents are veterinarians. I've always been a crazy cat lady, even when I was a kid. And so I was the one, like I really was the one that was like, I'm going to be a vet when I grow up, and I'm going to take over my parents' practice. And it was just kind of this like, my parents almost were like, we don't have to worry about Liz because she has a path, even though that's crazy for like a 12-year-old to be like, Liz is fine. But then I discovered stand-up. I got really into it. I was always quoting stand-up. I was super annoying. And then when I was, I think 14 or 15, I basically told my parents I'm going to be a stand-up comic. And who knows if they believed me. They were kind of like, okay, you know, it's a very hard life and da-da-da-da. But to my father's credit, he was like, well, if this is really something you want to do, you should ask the people that are already doing it how they got there. So he was like, you should write to them. And I was like, okay. So we had one computer in the living room that everybody shared, and every day I would like rush home so I could get the computer first, and I would spend like an hour after school researching emails, addresses, anything. So I made a list of every comic I wanted to write to. So this is, if I'm 15, this is 2000. So I wrote to Wanda Sykes Hall. She was married to a man. That's how far along it was. Wanda Sykes Hall, you know, Dave Chappelle, Eddie Murphy, Jim Gaffigan, but like before famous Jim Gaffigan. This was like he had a half hour on Comedy Central. Bill Burr, Bill Cosby. God, he didn't write back. Anybody you can think to, big or small. Like if they were on Comedy Central, they were famous to me, and like, you know, just the cliche people that you think. So only 2 people got back to me. Judd Apatow. This was post Freaks and Geeks, but pre 40-year-old virgin. Again, this is like 2000, and he had his email on his website because he wasn't a big. He was. I mean, in my mind, he was a big deal, but he wasn't who he is today. So I emailed Judd Apatow. He got back to me the next day and basically was like, stay in school. You got this. But it wasn't like the advice I wanted. And then the way my dad told me to write this letter/email was like a business letter, because I mostly got addresses. There wasn't a lot of email. And people are still figuring out email at that time. It was a business letter. So it was my name, my address, my phone number, my email. And then it was like, dear that person. And then I made it like a form letter. So it would be like, you know, dear Mr. Apatow, you know, I'm 15. I want to do stand up. I want to be like you when I grow up. Do you have any advice for how to get started? Blah, blah, blah. And then I would sign it if it was written. And my dad looked it over. He's dyslexic, so I'm sure it was filled with mistakes. I'm sure it was a mess. But I basically kind of had this. I just wanted advice. And so I did this form letter to everybody, and I just would change their name. And I found George Carlin's address. I don't know what the address was.
That's so crazy that it was just online.
Yeah, and I did some it's like I would go to like the address of the stars and stuff like that. But I guess what happened is that was he had an office that he went to every day in Santa Monica, and this was his office address. So I wrote this letter, and 2 weeks later I get a phone call, and it's George Carlin. I'm 15 years old. I'm freaking out. Also, I was home alone, and that is so rare when you're one of 5 kids. So I thought I was having a psychotic break. Like, I genuinely was like, I was like looking at phone records, and like the real thing that made me feel like it was real was 2 weeks later he sent a signed headshot that said, go do it. Okay. Because I hadn't done stand-up yet.
Aww.
So he calls me up. He's like, asks if I'm there. He goes, you know, what kind of advice do you want? I asked him a bunch of questions. And I would say the advice was not amazing. It was basically, you got to write a lot, you got to perform a lot. But I mean, what else are you going to say to anybody? But it was good, and it was mind blowing, and I was blown away. And he told me I could write to him whenever I wanted to. So I called my dad immediately. He's like, "This is crazy." And my dad actually gives really great advice. He goes, "Memories aren't reliable. Write it down. Just write down what he wrote. Even just date it, write it down, just so you know it happened, and you can look at it." And I still have that little note card in a filing cabinet. And so he sent me that signed headshot. I think like a couple months later, he sent me 4 tickets so me and my girlfriends could see him in New Brunswick. I was living outside of Princeton at the time. And then I think I wrote to him a couple of times. He always wrote back to me. He sent me his book came out like a year later, and he sent a signed copy of a book, which I still have. And then when I did stand up for the first time, I wrote to him, and he was like, great job. When I was 18, I was profiled in the New Yorker. I used to hand out flyers to get stage time, and it was called On the Bark. And it was me and a couple of comics that were interviewed. I sent him that magazine, and he called me up just being like, this is so cool. I didn't know what this was. I never heard of barking. Like, you know, he's in his 70s. You know, this isn't something he did. He was just always very open. And then a year later, he was coming to New York, and I asked him if I could get coffee with him. I had more questions about how to build out an hour, and I was 3 years in, and he said, sure. So we got coffee in the lobby of his hotel, and it was really amazing. He took out his laptop and showed me how he organized his hour and how he memorized long bits, and it's still actually how there's so much that he gave me creative permission to do, typing things out and writing things out, bringing it on stage, letting people know you're trying stuff out. The stuff that I still kind of, I don't know if I would have felt like I was cheating or whatever, as opposed to he's like, no, this is how you build it up and da-da-da-da. And like he showed me how he built out an hour and made things flow. And it was just beyond inspirational. It was a level of generous I still can't comprehend. And at that point, I had his phone number and I had his email, and I would email him at this point. And my first time on TV, I did Live at Gotham for Comedy Central. It was like a 7-minute slot. I was 22 years old, and I emailed him to be like, hey, you know, this airs on Friday. And he wrote back, I'm so excited. I can't wait to watch it. And he died 2 days later, which was heartbreaking. He was in the hospital emailing me. And it's so funny. It's taken me a long time to, you know, people know this story. And what's crazy is I kept everything. I've always been sentimental, whether you're a friend or a legend. And when it came out that Judd Apatow and Mike Bonifiglio were producing a special about Carlin, they also did a really beautiful, or not special, a documentary. They did a really beautiful documentary about Gary Shandling. And I mean, it was a 3-part documentary. I like cried through the whole thing. It was so beautifully done. So I heard that they were doing that. And I didn't know Judd, you know. So I reached out to SD at the Cellar, where I work, and was like, hey, I know this is kind of a big ask, but they're making a doc about Carlin. I have all these emails and letters when he was like a mentor to me when I was a teenager. At the very least, I would like to show this to them. Is there any way that I can either send it to you and you can send it to Judd, or if Judd's comfortable, I can email to him? And she was like, this is and I told her the whole story, and she was like, this is a beautiful story. And she forwarded it to Judd, because he was the other person I wrote to, and he wrote back to Esty. He's like, I hope I was nice to her. And then he gave me Mike Bonifiglio's information, and we talked. They ended up not doing the type of interviews they thought they were going to do, because this is all during the pandemic. So me and Gary Goldman and a couple other people did voiceover, where we just like read old fan letters from the 70s on it. And then I did they did this, like, Netflix did this podcast about the legends, and I was able to kind of tell them some stuff. But it wasn't until 2020 that I reread all those emails and letters, because I printed out emails, and I had all these letters in a filing cabinet. And the one credit I'll give to myself is I knew I was talking to a legend. Like, I thanked him every single email, every single letter. I was like, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. But he was such an incredibly generous and thoughtful person. And my parents are very thoughtful and generous people, and I know that's inside me, and I know I like helping people. But this business does beat you down, and you do get busy, and you do your priorities and how you talk to people in this business and other comics does shift. And because everybody's kind of, I would say, scared and I don't even know how to say it. Like, people can be clawy, and people can kind of come after you, and people can kind of steal your time in a way, and you can get taken advantage of being a generous person. And between how Carlin treated me when I was a teenager and the generosity and the time he spent to be kind of a mentor, has continued to be an inspiration for me, and something that I think was a bigger lesson than anything. We all know he's a legend. We all know he's one of the best comics out there, but he didn't have to take the time to do that. even once, let alone for years. And he did it for a lot of people. Even the cool thing about that Gary Shanley documentary, there's like a whole part where Gary like goes over, George goes over Gary's act and gives him notes and stuff. There's so many stories about his generosity. And I think even when Bob Saget died, who I didn't know, but all these stories about his generosity came out. And I think this business can be really selfish. I think this business can be cutthroat, as we all know. And I think this business can shift your priorities. And I think it was probably one of the most important influences of comedically, but also personally and emotionally to continue to be the person I want to be, which is to spend time with others and to pay it forward at the very least.
That's awesome. That's one of my favorite stories ever. I love that. And I love that you came in here after having just had, coffee with a young comic that had moved here. Absolutely. I love that. That's a full circle. It's a full circle moment.
And I try to remember that. I can't, clearly we have limited amount of time, but I also tell young comics, I go, I'm dyslexic. I can't answer all your questions, but if you ask them to me, I'll give you a little voice memo. That's the cool thing about Instagram has voice memos. Facebook does. Even like texting, like I can be like, nope, it's a bad idea. Don't do that. You know what I mean? Like at the very least, finding ways to be a resource the best way that you can. So actually another thing that really influenced me, it's this book called Give and Take. I think it's by Adam Grant. And it's about givers, takers, and matchers. And it's exactly what you think it is. So he asks his thesis is, who do you think is the least successful? Well, it's givers. Givers are the least successful. He goes, who do you think is the most successful? Givers. Givers are both the most successful and the least successful. And he spends the whole book showing you why that is. And essentially he's saying that givers that aren't successful is because they're either in the beginning of their give game and they haven't built up give collateral, because by being a generous person, karma and just favors and what have you. But also givers often get taken advantage of by takers. And when that happens, it's a resource and you lose it or you become resentful. There's all these things that can happen to somebody that gets taken advantage of by takers. But the givers that are successful are either they've built up give collateral. So there's people that just by the essence of you helping them want to help you back or what have you. And that's just the nature of being nice and it comes back to you sometimes. But also they learn not to be taken advantage of by takers. And it was the best book. I read it 10 years ago. And as somebody that did feel slightly indebted to Carlin and really a lot of people that helped me in the beginning of my career, I always felt like I needed to pay it forward. And I was raised to be a person that takes care of people, but I was getting exhausted and emotionally feeling resentful towards certain people. And I felt like good people just help people and they don't not help people. And that book was able to make me centered that it's like, no, if somebody doesn't understand the value that you're giving, you don't have to keep giving it. You have no responsibility to keep giving it. So now I continue to be a good person, but if somebody doesn't know what I'm giving them, or if somebody treats me shitty after I've done something for them, or they just don't, they're not somebody I want to be around, I can say no.
Right.
And it's been the best thing for me. So that gives me more time to help the people that deserve it. It gives me more time to be a better person and build my career so that I can continue to be a resource for others. But I think more and more, this business is hard and this business sucks and there's a lot of shitty people in it, but there's also a lot of incredible people in it. And I want to be another Carlin, both comedically and spiritually.
That's true. I feel like you have to find the gems in this business because it is crowded with a lot of people that you have to find the good people in the business. Do you find that on the road, you're someone that works the road a lot, do you find there are a lot of you meet a lot of great people on the road? Do you find like when venues that aren't necessarily comedy clubs, like indie venues, do you find them usually more fun to work? Like what's your experience?
I've met so many amazing people. I think I'm fortunate that I try to feel open and positive to different situations, and because my goal is always just to work, I don't really care where.
Yeah,
it's changing a little bit. I definitely would like it to be either a theater or like a typical comedy club as opposed to like an open bar, which can sometimes be more distracting. But in general, a lot of non-comedy clubs have been some of the best venues. There's been some incredible like rock venues that are just so excited for you to be there. And because you're different, they're excited. And it's different clientele. Small theaters that usually put on like plays and they aren't used to, I guess, somebody not crying on stage, you know? So I have noticed that the weirder venues or me being a different creative has been better. There's just some clubs that they're like this kind of well-oiled machine that you're just another comic and nobody really cares, that I want to get more and more out of those clubs. I would like to be more at clubs clubs in general, but like spaces that are excited to have me, which is the goal for everybody. You want a fan base and fans to be excited to see you. You want, bookers and venues to be excited, but you work up to it. And I would say I'm like 50-50. There's some venues where I truly feel like I could be anyone.
Yeah.
And I'm just a body, and whether people come or not, they don't care. And then I do venues where they're quoting my material and they're like, we're so excited that you're here. And you just feel like you earned the right to be there. And that feels really special. But I mean, I think you're always I try to, at the very least, if it's one of the earlier venues where I just don't feel like anybody's there, I go, all right, well, this is an experience. This is something to know. Let's learn the best I can from it. And I just try to get through it the best I can. But I would like to get to a place where every venue makes me feel special.
Right. So I guess we have talked a lot about advice, but what do you think is the best advice you've ever received?
Truthfully, and I'm still learning it, you can't take things personally.
Yeah.
I know we've all heard it. I know it seems almost like cliche advice. And I think what's really hard, because we're women, you're very pretty. You know what I mean? It has to be stated. You're young. You're smart. You're thoughtful. You're kind. All these things can be misinterpreted in this business. People are going to say fucked up things to you. Both, it seems positive. You're really pretty. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like it's mean. It actually is.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? And then there's going to be people that are shitty to you where it's just like, you shouldn't be here, or you're not funny enough to be here, or why are you taking up space? Whatever it is. There's people that are going to say things that sound personal. That sounds personal. This is about your appearance. This is about your humor. This is about you taking up space. This is about you. But it really isn't. That person doesn't like themselves. That person feels overlooked. That person has low self-esteem. That person's frustrated in their life. That person has so many things that they are projecting on you, that while somebody is saying something mean to you, whether it's to your face, a YouTube comment, a booker, another comic, whoever it is, it actually isn't personal. Whatever they're going through, it sucks that they're projecting it on you. It sucks that they're saying it to you. But do not let someone else's unhappiness control your happiness and control where you're going to go in your career. I am very fortunate there are more and more people that are enjoying what I do. That being said, every time a video goes viral, it goes through a sea of people that do not enjoy me. So it starts out, fans and friends are like, this is so good. I love this bit. And then it's like, make me a sandwich. Women aren't funny. Look at this ugly bitch. Whatever it is, it's an array of anything from my appearance to my style to my voice to my disposition to the lack of success of my career because I have success in my career. It's all over the place. But I can tell you right now, by knowing that it has nothing to do with me, it don't let these people stop you. It's just none of it is personal. Even when it feels personal, even when somebody's like, hey, I don't like your style and that's why you're not getting booked here, it still isn't personal.
Right.
That's just they like a certain style. Maybe they like, people that curse more. Maybe they like somebody that's cleaner. Maybe they, it is what it is. But I think more and more, it's still something that I'm constantly have to shift. I'm not going to say that I don't get my feelings hurt. I do. There's good days and bad days, but I'm not going to let my hurt feelings stop me from pursuing my career, because why would I let someone else's belief of themselves prevent me from doing what I'm doing? Half the reason they don't like me is because I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's the best advice I can give anybody in general, but I think just especially female comics. They're upset because why do you get to do something that they haven't built the confidence to do themselves?
Oh, you're so amazing. I'm going to listen to this episode like all the time. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I always pull I like always pull like a tarot card or an oracle card at the end of my episode.
I love it.
So
love foxes. So cute.
Yeah, this one is like a Woodland Warden oracle deck. The thing is, people are so here. I'm struggling with this. I don't know if I always pull a card for the episode, but lately people have been like, shouldn't you pull a card for me? What do you think makes more sense? I'm like, oh, I'll pull a card for like the vibe of the episode.
I guess I don't know enough about tarot cards to know what that means.
So I guess it's kind of, the oracle card will tell you like, it sort of just like reflects the energy of what's going on, I guess. It doesn't like predict anything. It just is like, this is what you need to hear right now.
If I'm being honest, I want one for myself.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. Okay, beautiful. Do you want to shuffle the deck?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Watch it be like, you're going to die tomorrow. And I'm like, no.
The foxes won't tell you that.
These foxes better be nice to me.
Yeah,
I'm going
right?
to London. I'm going to go see them.
It's funny. My childhood best friend lives in London. I haven't visited her yet, though.
Oh, you got to go. And I'll give you some places that you can try to get up.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you should definitely go. It's just what I like about London, the London scene. It's like one of my. It feels like a home away from home. Is they're just as passionate as New York. I think because of the subway, because they're smart, and they, you don't have to worry about language barrier. Okay, I can pick whatever I want.
Yes. Okay, let's see. Oh, he's cute. The badger and the ginkgo, healing wounds.
What does that mean?
Okay, we're going to read it from the book. Should I show the thing?
Oh, thank you.
He's very cute, the badger. I don't know why I love these decks so much. I like the art on them.
Yeah, they're really beautiful.
Okay, 32. Okay. Ginkgo is a sacred and ancient tree. Fossil records show the tree first arose in the Jurassic period millions of years ago. Native to Asia, the ginkgo is a symbol of peace and hope in China and can be seen in temples and gardens in Japan. The badger, in contrast, is known to be hot-headed and aggressive.
I've never felt so close to an animal in my life.
I could be the badger. Due to its speed and tendency to roam at night, the badger is often cast as a sinister shapeshifter in European and Asian folklore. Tempered by ginkgo, the badger invites us to reflect on harm we have may cause and seek to heal old wounds. Wow. Your actions have hurt someone. Apologize and take steps to right your wrong, setting the stage for healing. Consider whether your own wounds have led you to I don't know. Maybe it's not right. Maybe.
I mean, sometimes you hurt somebody.
Sometimes the badger is wrong. Or, I don't know. I don't think the card is right.
I'll let you know if I need to apologize to somebody soon.
I don't know. I mean, of all the cards to pull, apologize and take steps. Wow. I think you're more of the ginkgo, the symbol of peace and hope.
But I think we all have badgers inside of us.
I think so too. I mean, today I was upset because my jeans, they were washed too many times. I have my period. My jeans were washed too many times.
And just
the feeling is it's icky. So I was the badger.
I'm sorry to hear that.
My jeans were the ginkgo. Liz, where can people find you?
Everything is at Liz Miele, so it's LizMiele. I'm on literally everything from Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. My newest special is called The Ghost of Academic Future. It's free on YouTube, and I have 3 out of 4 hours free on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. And of course, you can find us on YouTube every week and join the Patreon, patreon.com/Natalie Cuomo. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Bye.